welcome to the Old Man Orange Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan.
And we're going back with Unproduced Scripts. We haven't done one of these in a while, but Ryan went out and found the Peter Craig Cowboy Bebop script from 2009. You know, back when, they were thinking about making a live-action Cowboy Bebop movie and so on. And is this the one that had, Keanu Reeves attached to play Spike?
Yeah. So this went through a couple different revisions.
Peter Craig, it's kind of an interesting writer because you look at him and it's he did The Town looked like his first big movie that got kind of made, which, literally would have been the same time as this. What was The Town, 2009, 10?
2010. This was written in 2009, but this isn't the first draft. I don't know how much involvement he had on the first draft because I went looking into the Cowboy Bebop movie, making of up and down of the movie, them being canceled and being made into a Netflix show, and which is still in production right now. But after that, looking at Peter Craig, oh wow, he wrote The Batman, which is currently filming. He has the Top Gun sequel on there, Bad Boys for Life, which I've heard nothing but good things about.
It's an amazing movie. It's just as good as the other two.
So yeah,
but then it's he had Bloodfather on there, which is a great fucking Mel Gibson movie. Even even if this isn't your cup of tea, but these are still huge flicks. He had the last two Hunger Games movies and whatnot. So it's just he didn't have a weak movie at all on his entire roster, which is I just feel you don't see that very often. There wasn't that one movie. He's oh, he did that stupid fucking flick. I mean, granted, that could have just been a paid for job, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that many good things about 12 Strong, but who knows? That might not be the script. It might be the direction.
It looked cool. It's it looked kind of almost like a war western, modern day. They're out there riding horses, shooting guns, and it has Thor on it. So I'm not gonna put a Thor movie down. And
I'm not gonna talk bad on a movie I haven't even seen yet. I'm just that's the only movie I've heard mixed things on of all these. But at the same time, it's for all I know, it's not even the script. It could be the direction, if that is bad. But who knows? Because everything else on here is pretty good. And I'll say this script is pretty good. Because for a while, when we first started doing these unproduced scripts, we started with the first draft of the Super Mario Brothers movie. And that one was oh, I really like this. And then everyone after that ranged from either oh, I liked it to I didn't like it. So,
yeah. Oh, I remember the Resident Evil one was cool. It was a little bit different. Good. That one was still pretty cool. But then it was there's one the Ninja Turtles one where it's it was okay. You know what I mean? Or the Spider-Man James Cameron one. It was
this. I didn't like the Spider-Man one.
Yeah, it was just I don't know. It wasn't as good as I kind of was hoping to be. It was just those just felt almost well, I kind of see why that wasn't made. Just saying.
I liked the Ninja Turtles one up until the third act, and the third act didn't ruin it. It just kind of it was going at a good pace, and it just kind of lowered a little bit for me. Yeah. And then whatchamacallit, Resident Evil, actually that one was a good script. I guess I just don't have all the nostalgia for old Resident Evil, so I'm I bet this speaks a lot to Spencer, but just reading it, I'm this seems like something that's seems accurate from what I know, and it was fast moving, and there's a lot of scares and a lot of action. So, and this one right here, I think this one's pretty good because, I mean, yeah, there are some obvious changes, and there is some stuff in there where I think if you're a fan of the series, you go well, I wouldn't do this or I wouldn't do that, but at the same time, you kind of understand some of the choices they make, at least most of the choices they make,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's the thing is I felt all in all, it is actually pretty accurate. I felt one of those ones oh, Peter Craig, and whoever else is maybe writing with him that's not credited and whatnot, but, it looks like they at least watched the whole Cowboy Bebop series. It wasn't they looked at the back of a DVD cover, read the paragraph on there, chucked the disc behind him and said, yeah, I fucking got this, because that's how I feel so many things. When they do certain adaptations, I just don't feel somebody actually puts the time and effort into going through the source material. I think they read a summary and just go whatever, cowboys and space, bounty hunting, I've seen a fucking movie before, and they just don't they don't go any farther and whatnot. Where this one's oh shit, there's some stuff in here that you're oh, you wouldn't have put that in there if you didn't watch the whole thing.
There's some things I had to Google to remind myself about, oh yeah, who's that again? Oh shit, they got him in there or her in there, So there's some things that you're right. They would have probably had to at least sit down. I mean, I could see him. I mean, he's look at this. He's got Batman on there. He's got Hunger Games. Even though this isn't really much of a genre type movie, he has The Town, which I can see that being kind of like a big film buff kind of movie. Mm-hmm. I can see him being into something like Cowboy Bebop and because there's moments, because a lot of times I'm surprised that when we do read these unproduced scripts, how accurate and some of the deep cuts they throw in there, especially given for the time, because there are moments where you have characters that are just kind of like throwaway references, but you have to watch the show to know those references.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Even just, I mean, it's a little bit later on, but they got VT, the trucker lady from the space trucking episode and whatnot in there.
Yeah, there's a part when we'll go into the story more of bit by bit, but there's even a part when they're just looking through different bounties and just nah, he's too far away. We don't have the time or money to get to him. That one, da-da-da. And they're 3 of the 4 characters they swipe through are characters from the show.
Yeah, so there's just small things like that. Really, probably the biggest thing, the real big difference, I guess, in this script compared to the show more than anything else, is that there is no Ed character in there. And I'm thinking, in my opinion, I think that's kind of the safe choice, because we've talked about it before on the podcast where we talk about Cowboy Bebop, where we did the retrospects and all that kind of stuff. Whenever, because Cowboy Bebop is one of those shows that you could almost be it's the greatest, almost gateway to anime, being to get somebody in and so on. But then there's Ed, and that's the one character that sometimes could be I don't know, it's this might be the character that they might not be able to accept, and it's a little too weird and wacky and so on. So I almost feel taking her out of this, I do kind of get, it's that's the safe one, because Mom and Pop in Oklahoma might see Ed going woo! With her arms up in the air, it's pasta or something like that, and just be what the fuck is going on, honey?
It's either that or they just flat out change her character altogether. And not saying you couldn't have a character who's zany or something like that, oh, she's off her Ritalin again and she's running down the fucking halls or whatever, on a little moped. But you could have done something like that, I guess. Or there's also, she's just a smart ass kid who hacks and all that and just has a couple of quirky little one-liners. But I mean, I understand taking her out. I was expecting her to pop in at some point, because going back to this, there was this video. I'm not sure how accurate everything in this video is, but it just covered the, Cowboy Bebop movie in the talks from 2008, live action movie, mm-hmm. to where we're at now with the production of the Netflix show. And there was an earlier draft where it did seem kind of this thing where they weren't in charge. I'm not sure if it was Peter Craig or someone else, but they weren't entirely sure what it was. They said in some meetings, some not meetings, but in some articles, apparently it's going to have a heavy emphasis on the bloody eye drug from mm-hmm. the first episode, Asteroid Blues. They're going to expand on that, and then it was also going to play into Vicious, and it was going to pull a lot of inspiration from the Cowboy Bebop movie, the animated movie. And the guy, one of the producers, is asked, "Is Ed gonna be it? Is Ed gonna be in it? Who's gonna be in it?" Everyone's gonna be in it. And we read this, no one's in it. So maybe she was in an earlier draft that we don't see. And I don't know if Peter Craig wrote that one, but apparently the drug was this also just might be rumors, but apparently the reason why it's called Cowboy Bebop was the name of the drug is Bebop, some shit like that. They're well, no one's going to want to believe a ship's called Bebop. We're going to have to call the drug Bebop because, you're on drugs. You think of weird, wacky shit. Who's going to call a ship Bebop?
You think of weird stuff, like a jazz concert. Because that's always what I think of. But yeah, I almost feel with Ed, you could have just done the toned down version of Ed. You know what I mean? Where you just come the weird wackiness, almost the unrealistic stuff that she kind of does, and just kind of keep her as the weirdo computer hacker. Because there is even scenes farther in this that instead they almost kind of give just the Faye. But I always felt well, that's almost where the Ed character would have taken over. But instead we just have, because they're who's the other woman, I guess, can take the job of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel eventually there's moments where I was thinking this is probably we're gonna meet Ed, and there's a couple parts in the third act where I was like, this is probably where Ed's gonna come in, or like Jet's gonna know somebody and have some weird contact, like here's my niece or some shit like that was gonna happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But regardless, I could honestly say there's a couple things in the movie. I mean, this is also this probably would have got revised and whatnot, but there's a couple of things in here where like, you kind of underutilize this character, and that character I don't think would do this, but that's not enough to ruin the scripts or the or anything. I think that they really do have a good grasp of the source material, and and there's some things about it, because Bebop is also a very I don't mean this in a bad way, but a very muted show. Like it's not overpacked with exposition. There's a lot of things that they kind of let you piece together, and there's a lot of nuance to it. So maybe people were filling in that nuance with their own ideas. You know what I mean? Because there's some things that are clear that have been said in the show, and there are some things they just kind of like threw the pieces out there, and they never really spoke on it after that. They you piece it together, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of let the mood and like the setting kind of describe it and whatnot. But as we kind of get into this, it pretty much just starts off first and foremost. They're on like this kind of like prison planet type thing or whatnot. And of course, Vicious is there, and he's like working on like a chain gang in space, like in a sense.
Yeah, and it's good. It's they're on some prison planet, working in like far below sub-zero temperatures, and the people that he's kind of has sort of a friendship with that are there is Yudai, who is the guy who Jet was after, and Jet thought he was the guy that took his arm, but it wasn't. He just kind of helped stage it. So you have Yudai there, and then you have what's his name? Wang Long.
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
You have Wang Long, which that's kind of interesting because Wang Long was, I didn't know this till I looked it up, but Wang Long was one of the crusty old fucks looking like the Green Lantern elders that run the Red Dragon Syndicate. That's who Wang Long is. He's one of those guys. So for a second, I was thinking it was Shin or Shun, one of those two. But
Shenlong from Dragon Ball Z.
Shenlong from Dragon Ball Z, or Shenron, yeah.
Shenlong was just there. He's all like just this giant dragon, but he's like strapped up to like a little ball and chain. Like, I can't go anywhere. I gotta drill through this ice.
I owe some debts, and a man must like live up to that, And he just has like he's having a little pickaxe that he just holds with his thumb and his index fingers.
His little dragon hands.
Yeah.
But
the whole thing with that though is I was thinking that you could have probably used someone other than him, because in this it's not some crusty old fuck. He's like a young Asian guy as opposed to some guy like 3 hours away from death, So, regardless of that though, they at least knew that name, which I'll be honest, I didn't know the name. I just one of the old fucks. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we wouldn't have put two and two together. But as they're kind of on there and whatnot, and then of course Vicious has this like ploy to kind of get his way out of there and whatnot. At first he just like attacks the guy with like his axe or drilling tool just in the hand, and then of course he's getting sucked down in space. Guy's like, oh my hand, I'm not freaking out and so on. And even to the point where the guy Chopper smashes his own hand off to because he can't like handle what's going on with like the air being sucked into his
I don't know if he
suit.
Smashed it off or what happened, but they say it like his hand shatters once it actually goes outside and touches the oxygen or lack thereof oxygen.
Well, it's because it's like 395 degrees below Fahrenheit, so it just froze instantly. But I think what it did is the spacesuit like sealed up like the puncture, but it just didn't seal up his hand. But once the guy was like, my hand's frozen, he's like, what the fuck? And shatters it and whatnot. And then it kind of just, this would almost be like your 007 intro, where you got this somewhat prison kind of break action scene in the beginning to sort of get your movie rolling.
And Asimov from Asteroid Blues, the first episode, the guy who dropped in the bloody eye and has like the whole crackhead thing going on. Crackhead and Benicio del Toro, basically.
Yeah.
He's the one kind of helping lead the thing, and they even reference the bloody eye because he's like gritting his teeth. He looks kind of like a junkie, and Vicious even says something to him like I thought that shit's supposed to give you faster reflexes.
Yeah, he even kind of mentioned because he's using it along the way, and And pretty much, yeah, they just kind of go through a big old action scene and whatnot, and you see that Vicious pretty much gets out of here. Which I guess if you didn't know who it was, you'd be like, who the hell is Vicious? If you never watched Cowboy Bebop. But you'd be like, oh, that's our main villain of the movie. I get it.
Look at the guy with the long hair and how stoic he is, and he just attacked that guy. I'm assuming that's the bad guy. So, and then they get out of there, and in the process, that Vicious kills, because they take the ship and they go through something and they shoot like a bunch of hydrogen tanks or something, which caused the whole place to explode, killing literally everybody on it.
Yeah.
So, and he says this way it'll be harder to narrow in who escaped and who's out there. Because as far as I know right now, everyone's dead.
Yeah, he was just covering up the tracks, and in a sense, they would just probably write it off as like, oh, the entire colony blew up. So yeah, we're just gonna have to get a new one soon. But past that point, that's when we cut to like the Bebop. And one thing I do like about this, I love how all the main characters are right there at the beginning. Jet's there, Spike's there, and Faye's there. It's not like one of those ones where it's like, hey, here's Spike Spiegel, and he's 16 years old, and we're gonna. By the end of the movie, he will maybe decide to become a bounty hunter, but now he's just figuring out school life and like.
And how to talk to girls. Oh no!
Yeah, exactly. Spike would be the character. He's like, and there's 6 girls that are all into him, but he doesn't seem to care. He's just standing, arms crossed, against the side of the wall, like, whatever.
Who's the new kid in class? That's Vicious.
He's a dick.
You find out that like Jet was like what Jet was like
principal.
yard duty or something at that school.
Yeah.
They were all there from the beginning. They just never realized it.
God, that sounds like something that someone would have put. There was probably a guy out there who had that idea that hopefully just got shut down real quick, being like, no.
Bebop High.
Yeah, Bebop High, pretty much. Just they're all there.
Look, I don't know if the kids are going to be really into like this whole like bluesy jazz thing. What do we think about maybe get some of these SoundCloud rappers on that shit?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this time period, we wouldn't have had that yet almost. Well, I guess they would have kind of been around then.
I'm just thinking about when they were trying to get it by the Netflix by that point.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking like 2009 or so on, but still, it's like one of those ones. Like, I'm glad, though, they just go, hey, here's all the characters. Like, we don't really need to sit there and give you the long, like, pre-origin story. It's not one of those movies that's
what I'm
like...
afraid they were going to do.
Yeah, that's what I was, too. Because, so many of those movies, in a sense, like the real movie doesn't start till like an hour and a half, almost even 2 hours into it. Like you have to get through this huge origin and so on. Where this one's already like, nope, they're all bounty hunters. They're actually already together. In a sense, this is actually faster than the TV show. You know what I mean? And then we'll explain some backstory along the way and flashbacks. I'm like, oh, perfect. That's the ultimate way to do it.
Well, this thing, I mean, some people will say blasphemy because the part of the thing. I think there are those people like I'm not saying they dislike Cowboy Bebop, but they really like it so much they can't imagine straying away from it at all.
They look at it like it's like text written in stone that Moses brought down from. he's like I brought 2 books. I brought down the Bible and I brought down the Cowboy Bebop script.
Sessions 1 through 27 and a movie, which is in a separate stack.
Yeah, there's always those people out there that treat it like that. But I always feel like in a movie, I don't mind a little bit. Like I know you're putting together one story, you're absorbing, of course, a bunch of episodes and other movie and what have you. So I don't mind a little bit, just as long as it's not like a hardcore, like, oh, well, that's not the character at all. Where I feel like these characters are all generally it. I mean, Spike's in there and he's like punching the punching bag. He's doing like Jeet Kune Do. It's like you're almost getting the idea of like, okay, here's his martial arts. You see like his kind of body style and shape and fighting styles going on. You know what I mean? I feel like that really kind of goes, oh, okay, we know who this is. I mean, even when they show Jet, it's like, he's all big and buff and you see his robot arm and it sounds almost like it's like doing the Mad Max thing where it like shows like parts of him as it goes on. But then you see he's cooking and he's got an apron on to make it kind of like, oh, it's a little bit comical. We saw this big, brooding, like, old bald guy, and now it's like, oh, okay. he's got his apron on, so he's kind of fun.
Yeah, and like, sorry, that thing blinked out there for a second. You see, they get a point across the ship is kind of like deteriorating. It's having a little bit of trouble getting by. They even get across that like Jet's not the best cook, but he's the only cook on the ship,
Yep.
he's just like, oh yeah, there's no let's see, paprika, like gonna have to stick with nutmeg.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's trying his best.
He's trying, and then like it's like whenever something bad happens, like on the ship, like gravity gives out or water's acting up, and people say, Jet, this is happening. He's like, all right, you want a fucking mint on your pillow when I'm done fixing that, So there is like, so they get that across, and they're kind of looking like, I want to say that they're just kind of hanging out. We just kind of get more of a sense of what everyone's going through, essentially, where they're at right now. I'm not sure if it's introduced here. I think it's introduced here, but they make when Spike in the show says, "I'm looking at the past. I'm looking through one eye, sees the past. The other eye sees the present." Mm-hmm. They make that quite literal in the movie. Yeah, because I thought that was interesting. That's not like I really wouldn't have thought of that, but I think that's interesting. And I heard someone saying like, well, the thing about Spike is the fact that he can't let go, and they take that choice away from him. Like, I think you're digging just a little too deep. It's more of just a plot device, so you could get this explanation without like, well, let me tell you how this happened. Like a harp plays and it flashes back or some shit,
Yeah, well, in this one too, I know it's a little bit farther in the story that they explain it, because it's kind of like, because there's a rule set up that Jet's got these like rules, you know what I mean? And then like it's always like number 2 rule, we don't explain our past. Like I can't remember what the first rule was. I already forgot what it was, but
they don't flat out say it, but they imply it's no fucking on the ship.
Oh yeah, they kind of
no dating teammates.
Yeah, nobody fucks my dog.
No one. Yeah, that was never really a worry. Well, you didn't see the last guy.
But there is this kind of thing that as time goes on, they kind of almost Jet breaks his rules, and he's kind of explains some of the past. He's like, well, let me tell you. He's saying it to Faye. He's like, when I found Spike, I was just leaving the old police academy, and as I was flying up, there was just this boy
right out of the parking lot.
Yeah, up there floating around for God knows how long, and I looked at him, and he was all shot up, and he was missing an eye and everything like that. So he's like, well, shit, let me turn back around and go. I just got this new arm on. I'm gonna go back and take him to the same guy to get an eyeball. And it's like, what it is when they put like the new robotic eye into Spike, it's like as time went on, like for some reason, like his brain kind of like hooked up with the chip in the eye, and so it started playing his dreams almost through that eye. So he would be kind of awake, but he would see the dreams kind of play out in that one robotic eye, which is like
past memories,
kind of sci-fi, yes. But I kind of liked that. I thought that was kind of neat. I was like, oh, that's just different.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because when he looks at somebody who he has history with, sometimes it flickers. Because when he looks at Faye, it's like, I guess he's known her. They've been working together for a few years by this point. She's flicking, like her different clothes are flickering in and out, just different hairstyles, her like makeup, her hair's changing constantly. So it's one of those things where every so often it'll get a flashback, you get a little bit of context clues of certain things from seeing somebody, or it's just like sometimes you're like, you know what, this is really important exposition time. Here's a longer flashback, and it makes an emphasis at a couple points where there's no, which I think is both kind of creepy and actually makes more sense. You don't hear the audio, you don't hear the dialogue from that time. You just see it, and you kind of hear what's ever around you at that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they're just like visions.
Nice. So I think that's cool when it comes in. Like it says, he sees this, he sees that, and all we hear is like Spike's heart beating in real time and him groaning and just like, kind of like just trying to shake it out, but he can't shake it out. He's just forced to see it and relive it.
And it's like throughout this too, Spike's got these headaches kind of going on in this thing too, and they're getting sort of worse as time goes on. And I think it's sort of due to this same kind of like eye chip thing going on. Yeah, it's kind of getting to him and whatnot. And then the other thing is kind of weird, or it's not maybe like too weird, but you don't think about it, but like in this one they almost make it that like Faye sort of like Spike, just a tad bit almost in there. She seems to be almost like Spike seems to be like, oh, whatever, just gonna punch my punching bag until you leave. But like they have it where it's almost like it reminds me almost more like, it sounds almost more animated the way that's set up in here, because it just feels like, oh, there's this really hot chick on the ship. It's just like, I don't care. I got my mission to do. What's your mission? Well, we can't explain the past, so you can just leave my room whenever you feel like it.
We'll come in. We'll cover that in the third act. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's also like the whole thing with that. I guess depends how you want to make it anime. It's like there's the I don't care, which is the edgy boy with the emo cut with his arms crossed in the corner of the classroom, or there's the like what she likes me, what
like the slipping on a banana peel everywhere he goes,
falls on her tit or something. Then
yeah, not that version of it. The other one where it's just like the guy's so cool and it's like, but no matter what, it's like he's got all these hot chicks just hanging out around him, but he doesn't seem to care. He's just too cool for it.
Well, I think I took it as, in all honesty, I think the show tried to play with people's expectations, because you see her and you see that and you're like, oh, at some point these two are going to be fucking, but they never do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing about the show, that it's not like the it just, people didn't see that coming. You assume at some point they're going to hook up, and they never do. And Spike's not interested, and I got the sense, you know what? Like, I got the sense that she could be interested in the future. Maybe, given some of the other guys she's fucked around and dated with, that Spike would be an upgrade, in all honesty. But at the same time, I'm not surprised that they play around with that more in this movie, but they don't make a big deal of it at the same time.
Yeah, well, I felt like they used it as like a slight to give it a little bit of a love triangle kind of thing. I think that's kind of what they're going for. Because that's one thing I do like about the show, is it's like, no, we're just three people that work together. You know what I mean? And nobody fucks the dog.
It's weird you had to emphasize that. I'm just saying, past experiences with other people. Why do you think the dog doesn't like to go into like locked into like rooms with like doors to close?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's like almost in this way. I think they just kind of wanted to have that just there, and it's just there a little bit. I like how it's not there, like, because at first when I was reading the script and I kind of saw there's just those little moments in kind of like words that like sort of Faye would say, or like sort of like the reactions, because you just kind of come into like, Spike's bromance, be like, oh, she's just kind of coming in, and be like the narration would say, it'd be like, you kind of stand there kind of sexy, Spike's doing pull-ups with his shirt off, and it's just,
Jesus, I always liked watching you work out, that kind of shit.
Yeah, she had like things like that. I'm like, are they gonna make those two like get together like in this movie? Like, it's one of those ones like a nuclear bomb's gonna be going off at the end of the film and whatnot, and he's just be like sheltering her eyes, be like, it's okay. As they like kiss or something like that. It's like, and I'm kind of glad that, I know this is kind of getting ahead, but like it doesn't really go into that though. It still kind of keeps them just far enough away that it's like, oh, okay. Like, she almost like, in her mind, it's like, hey, we could get together, but if we don't, it's not the biggest deal.
I took that, and I'm wondering if like another part of you is like, well, even though she's on the ship, it's not that they really trust her or want her there that much. It's like, look, it's hard, it's expensive keeping upkeep on a ship, so she's not the best employee, but she's an employee. So she's here to kind of help us out. I mean, I know we all kind of want to get rid of her, but if we get rid of her today, we're fucked. So let's just plow through this. And that's kind of how I take it, with the reason why she's there. And plus, Spike doesn't entirely trust her. So that's another thing. They've kind of come into that a few times, because a certain plot point comes in. Like, I'm surprised they never did this in the show. I mean, I guess there's a variation of this plot point and within the last couple episodes, but it never really was a huge... I'm surprised they never really went the full distance of it in the show. Or it even seems like a plot point you could use for like the animated movie even. Because like, oh, that's different,
Yeah, exactly. Kind of just that little bit of untrust, but it's almost like, hey, we have rent to pay here. We need the third roommate. So it almost has like a sitcom almost feel at the same time.
Well, and then as they're going through, they're looking through different like people. There's Big Shot, but it's not a TV show. It's just this social network for bounty hunters, more or less. And they're looking through different people, and through there they reference Rico or Rocco, whatever his name is, the guy that stole the plant to help his blind sister. They reference that, but he's too far away, and they don't have enough gas in the tank to get there. They reference the environmental terrorist lady who was turning people into chimps. They reference her. They reference Domino something, who is the guy who Ed was going after in the Mushroom Samba episode.
Oh, yeah.
So they make these quick little references, and they come across Asimov, and that's where Spike has. I think we see first time his little eye twitch thing. Like, all right, we got to figure out where he's at. So then they head to like Tijuana, which is a little like remake of Tijuana and kind of a little asteroid belt type area. And when they get there, it's sort of like a reenactment, lightly, not too much, but a little bit of a reenactment of the first episode. But Faye is there helping Spike out, and they add this other element to it, which is gravity on this place is a little different. So if you throw something in the air, it floats and lasts in the air a little longer. You could also probably jump higher and all that.
Yeah, because it's almost reminds me like it's like kind of like being on Halo or something like that.
I think it was kind of like, here, this is going to be sort of like our action set piece, and this is also going to be something we can cut to in the trailer. Like, whoa, what the fuck is this? How do you see how he's jumping? Why is he doing that? And you see a movie, oh, it's only for that scene. Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's just
kind of like when you went to go see like Max Payne. Like, what? There's fucking angels in this? Like, oh, he's just tripping.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that in the trailer. I was like, I remember that in the game. But yeah, so it's like it kind of goes there, and yeah, it is in that kind of bar, and there's a bunch of crusty old guys playing poker, and of course, Faye goes over and she just has to clear them out because that's like her thing. She can't resist, getting some money, stealing some stuff and what have you. And I even like there's even a scene too that like Spike kind of buys. There's like this old like hobo lady selling like flipping toys or whatever. It's just like one of those ones where you wind up, it's like does a backflip, whatnot. And Spike buys it, and I'm like, well, that's going to come around to somewhere. Like, why would he just buy a random flipping toy?
Yeah,
but it's kind of cool it's cool where it comes back around to and whatnot. But then they start going to look for the bounty that they're kind of after on this one here. And there's this girl, Maria, that's walking around and whatnot. And for some reason, like, I felt like Spike knows her. I mean, I know he knows the guy that he's with, but maybe that's the reason why he knows who she is. Because he kind of gets in this, like, conversation with her and whatnot. And she go ahead.
I don't think he knows her. I think it's more of just trying to be friendly, and I also think they're trying to show that she's like a nice girl who's in over her head. And she's not the lady that Asimov was with in the first episode. Her name wasn't Maria. It was like Katrina or Cassandra. It was something kind of like that.
Oh yeah.
So it's definitely meant to be that character. It's meant to be some like fill-in position for that role, because she's like the lady who, it's not that maybe she's doing something bad, but it got more of a sense of her that she's in over her head and she's kind of a little overwhelmed by the whole thing, but she's wants to be with her man so they can one day get to Mars.
Yeah, exactly. And she talks about Mars like, oh my gosh, I hear that, everything's a fantastic there and so on. And Spike's like, yeah, well, I was born there. Not that great.
It's not all citrus groves and theme parks and casinos. I'm gonna tell you that right now. And he even says on the show, like he says, like, "Oh, it's just like I hear Mars is great. Yeah, if you're rich, And in this, so basically, he's trying to get a hold of the bloody eye because the bartender more or less kind of helps him out. And there's a quick little action scene where, because in Cowboy Bebop, there's like whenever they go somewhere, there always is those like couple of crusty old fucks. They just not there's a couple of crusty old fucks. There's the crusty old fucks that run the Red Dragon Syndicate, and then there's those three crusty old fucks that look like a couple of day workers that just pop up randomly throughout the series. They're like in Asteroid Blues. There's the episode where they're going against, that was another guy that messed the chess master, the guy who's really good at chess that Ed became friends with. They're in that episode. They're in a bunch of random episodes. They're even in the movie. They're helping save the world in the movie because they're flying jets or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So, here they make them bad guys, but let's be honest. I don't think anybody was really expecting to see them in this movie.
Yeah, I feel those are those things where it's like, okay, yeah, they are kind of bad guys, but I felt like, hey, that gives it just a momentary, like, hey, you remember these guys? Like, at least they're kind of there. I think that kind of works. And it sounds like a one and done. I think that's kind of fine.
Mm-hmm. And they make it, I think it's kind of interesting because it sounds like they're all dressed. It makes a point somewhere in the script that they're all dressed like they're Mexican day workers, but they're Chinese.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think that sounds very Bebop to me. I mean, it's kind of ambiguous. I assume they're all like Mexican or whatever watching the show, but it's at the same time though. I always like those because there's the one guy who's always bitching and moaning. He's like, "God damn son of a bitch! You taking all my money that I worked my ass off for." And there's the one guy who's just almost kind of like, "Oh yeah, we sure worked really hard that day." And there's the one guy who's just always protesting things like, "Oh, we're the guys that always work in the field with you, you dumb old fuck!" Like, I forgot that, So.
Yeah, no, those characters are always great because they're just that little bit of like fun, kind of almost like just classic old men kind of sitting outside after work and just kind of, bitching about the youth and so on.
One of them cowboys. Hey, we used to be cowboys back in the day too. Yo, yes. Oh, that's great. That was in the movie, I believe, the animated movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, those guys, they like Faye wins them in some poker. They want their money back. She takes the money and bounces out. And that's where shortly after they're getting into a meeting and I think Spike sees Asimov and then he gets all like, "That motherfucker, there he is," and has one of those little flashback kind of things where he recognizes him from a different angle and we get like a flash of like a knife coming into his vision or whatever. And then out of that, we get this cool action scene, this big long act. I'll say that this script, it goes heavy into details because sometimes you read these scripts and it's just kind of like, this happens, that happens, action scene ensues, but here's the key points. This one, it goes into detail with like bit by bit of the action.
This one's almost written like a book. Like I will say, it's only like a step away from actually being like the Cowboy Bebop novel.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does go into a big action scene, and it's actually really cool. I mean, he starts blowing up the place and whatnot, and he starts yelling at his wife, Maria, and whatnot. He's like, "You let him fucking here, what the hell? Put the goddamn pineapple down, it's not that big of a deal."
Because she makes a big deal that like she comes home with a bag of groceries, and
she's never had pineapple before. And she's like, "I've never had pineapple, it only grows on Mars nowadays."
And it's super expensive, and you have to get it on the black market, which... at some point, like a shootout happens and she runs into like the bathtub holding the pineapple. And at some point, like that's all she has. That's this thing she has that's worth the most is a pineapple by that point. And it gets all shot up and mangled, but it's still there, which I'll say that it kind of like gives you a couple shots through here. For some reason, a picture, like a shot of just like some guns and a couple grenades next to a pineapple. That seems like kind of like something that would stand out like in like... I don't know what effect this movie would have had in the long term of movie history. That sounds like one of those shots that would stand out that people would make homages to, kind of. You know what I mean?
Like, if, like, let's just say, like, who knows what movie company kind of had it at the moment, but it's almost like, when you see, like, there's, like, the Universal or the Paramount, and they kind of have, like, the big moments of almost, it seems like, the last 30 years of movies or something like that, that would run in there in that, like, preview for, like, getting your new Blu-ray 4K.
Keanu Reeves dressed as like Spike Spiegel pointing a gun, then quick shot of me the pineapple, like in the pineapple and the fucking guns on the table. I don't know, because they allude to that a couple of times.
Yeah, it makes a big deal about that pineapple. I mean, even like as things are going on and there's like a grenade goes off, the pineapple's rolling by and whatnot. And at some point, because like Spike takes that little toy that we were talking about that does the flip things, and he attaches it to like one of his guns, which you think you attach it to like a grenade, but he attaches it to the gun. So it'd be interesting to see exactly how it looked. But when it was supposed to kick, it would pull the trigger and it would fire off a couple of times somehow, some way. And that ends up, getting killing the dude and whatnot. And I think because Maria gets shot somewhere along this, like really this one, she's like a lot of people just get like a lot of like casualties of war that just kind of happen and just.
I thought that, let me see here. I took it as Maria because I was wondering if she died because I read it as the place blows up and she jumps out the window before it happens. So I assumed that she was going to come back later, like, "This is for my beloved," but she never does come back. So I'm wondering if she did die or if she just jumped out because Maria climbs into the bathtub with the pineapple. Because it has these big text. At some point, she jumps out of a building.
She did die because I remember like she was sitting there, kind of like bleeding out and whatnot. And then Spike says something like as she's kind of laying there dying, being like, the last thing he says is like, "You know what? Mars isn't all it's up, meant to be or whatnot."
Oh, really? Okay, maybe I missed that line.
And then like she kind of does, and then he picks the pineapple up and takes it fucking home.
Well, I'll explain why he took the pineapple. Like, well, she ain't gonna fucking need this.
Yeah. Because that's where there's a timer going off with like the Semtex explosives that Spike set up on there too. Or no,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
Asimov set up those things. Well, somebody set up, like, there's a lot of explosions going on here. This movie almost has, like, 90s explosions going down, where you're going to have these massive shots and whatnot. But I want to say, yeah, as that thing's going down, yeah, because I found it right here where it's like, Spike's like, hey, that's a nice pineapple. And then she's like, oh, it's grown on Mars. 60,000 on the black market. Never tasted one. And then as she's, like, bleeding out and whatnot, she's shot a couple times and whatnot. Spike goes, just so you know, Mars isn't all sunshine and citrus groves. And then he takes the fucking pineapple as the timer's counting down and walks away.
Oh, that's fucking cold. I missed that part in there somewhere. Yeah, okay.
I think she was already kind of dead, and then the explosion just solidifies it.
Yeah, I thought it said she jumped out the window or something.
I think she did, but I think she got hit. I just think she got hit in the crossfire.
I just always assume, like, if a character jumps away off screen after an explosion, like, well, they're gonna come back, but she doesn't. Maybe that's something he wrote in there. Be like, you know what? There's already so much shit happening at the end of this thing. Because I'm not gonna lie, this doesn't seem like a little, like, cheap ass little, like, hour and 40 or even like this seems like a 2.5 hour movie almost.
Yeah, because it's 122 pages or whatever script wise, but like the way it reads though is, since it's so thick, I probably would say if you shot it just as is, it would be almost 3 hours.
Well, then, like, you know, Spike kind of realizes he's having a talk with Asimov, and then Faye fucks up and accidentally shoots him because she thinks he's giving him some information. Like, wait, Julia's alive? Like, yeah, Julia's alive because they have history together. And right as he's about to tell him where Julia is, that's where he gets shot through the chest. And then we cut to them, like, loading his body onto the Bebop. And, like, Jet's like, what the fuck happened? Like, Spike's just like, Faye killed another Mark. Like, what? I thought he was going to shoot you. Like, we were talking.
Yeah, he even talked about, like, how her aim was off. She's like, I didn't realize it was aiming so high or something like that. You know what I mean?
And then there's even, like, this more of a, almost kind of, like, dark, slapsticky moment where he, like, coughs up for a minute. He's still sort of alive. And they just start, like, Jet just starts, like, I don't know, just starts, like, pounding on his chest. And, like, Spike's like, that doesn't look like CPR. Like, we can bring him back. And then we just cut to him just dead on the counter later. And their heads bowed, like, well, that didn't go as planned.
Yeah, it's like, how much is he worth now that he's dead? Yeah, no.
And I like how they still say, well, he's dead, but let's see if we can still at least get something for him. So they put him in a body bag and they take him to like a drop-off station. And this probably would have been fun to do for, like, you know, the production designer, or just maybe make more references to the show that didn't make it into the scripts. But just, like, there's this big long line of, like, different types of bounty hunters and their bounties, whether they be in, like, this almost seems like something out of, like, a 90s cyberpunk, like, dystopian movie. Like, apparently people, like, roguelike characters be wrapped up in, like, duct tape or shackles, just all kinds of weird mannerisms, and all looking like, you know, this dude looks like he's covered in tattoos and doesn't have a shirt on. This dude looks like this, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's just so much all walks of life in these bounty hunters, and everybody has their own weird ways of, like, capturing and bringing guys in and whatnot. You could just give a lot of character to these ones.
And here's two little references they make. Well, one of them's a little bigger, it comes back around full circle. But when they're taking him in, and I don't remember if it's here or a little bit later, but when they're taking him in, they see, like, Cowboy Andy in the crowd. Like, oh, fuck, it's that guy. Yeah. Don't give him a reason to talk to us, otherwise he's never going to leave. He's like, oh, you got another stiff, huh? Oh, it happens. What you going to do? You know? And then, like, hey, Andy, hey, all right, cool. There's that guy. And then like, when they go up to turn him in, there's two different cops. One, I think Spike kind of knows. Spike knows them both, but there's a guy named Fad. He has a. You
mean Jet knows them both more than anything?
Jet knows them both. I meant to say, there's, like, a guy named Fad, like John McFad or whatever. But I realized, oh, that's supposed to be his partner that screwed him over in the show. Yeah. They just gave him a full name, because in the show he just calls him by his nickname, Fad. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. I thought that was interesting. Yeah, no,
I thought that's kind of cool. And that comes back around way later, too. So it kind of gives, you know, sort of Jet, you know, some story and stuff. Because the only thing I noticed is Jet, he almost doesn't have any action scenes in this movie for the most part.
No, he gets some good moments, but not really much action. It's kind of like, it literally is kind of like the Cowboy Bebop movie, which I absolutely love that movie. I have very little complaints about it. My only complaint is Jet does a lot of planning, and he does a lot of he's more the, even though he's a big bulky guy, he does more of the planning, but he does get his hands dirty. He does do punching. He only punches one guy in the animated movie. And that's all he's really does, aside from like planning things out and helping orchestrate whatever Spike wants to do.
Yeah.
So I feel a little bad that he didn't have a chance to do more of that. But in this one, I feel like even though he's not doing as much punching or shooting, he's still there getting things done in one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, he's still a big part. I'm not saying that. It's just, yeah, he's never, I don't think he's really ever firing a gun for the most part. Other than, I think he shoots like a turret once at some point.
Yeah. The Bebop has turrets, which I guess they just had to spice up the action because it didn't have guns in the show.
And I literally just pictured it looking like they were in like the Millennium Falcon shooting those things when that scene comes on. As these like space pirates are coming in.
They also do this thing where when they're turning him in, like, sorry, there's nothing we can really do. The guy was only worth money. It was worth like the money on like the information that he had. And be honest, there's like with everything that got destroyed for whatever reason, I don't remember why. His prints aren't worth shit. This and that, whatever. Like, I can't. The only thing I can promise you is I can give him a good funeral. And it just shows like a quick shot of like an airlock. I'm just like shooting his body out into space, and like his body just bumps off the side of the Bebop as it's flying away.
Yeah, that's the part I thought was kind of weird. It's like they shoot him into space, but why is it just like crash right into the Bebop? And the Bebop's like gets hit by it's like hey, and then takes off. So this is what you get. We're gonna shoot his body into space. We're gonna shoot it right at you though.
I just thought that was funny. Just like it's just a reminder, like fuck, you know, like all right, time to at least that happened, and just as the body just hits it is a reminder, like
yeah, thanks.
But then this may have happened before then. I don't remember how exactly, but then at some point we get exposition because Vicious and his whole entourage go back to the Red Dragon Syndicate, and he has a scene with Mao Yenrai. And what I do like about this movie is, I feel like in this script. And this isn't any slant against the show, because the show was mainly about the main four members, and then every so often digging into a little bit into other characters. But this kind of gives characters who only had small parts in the show, bigger parts in the movie.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Now Yenrai is in it. He has a significant role.
Well, it's kind of weird because at first, like before they kind of mentioned his name and so on, they kept going like they're kind of like, "Oh, Spike, it's your dad" and whatnot. I'm like, what? They're gonna give Spike like a dad figure like in this thing, and so on like that. And then it was like, oh, it's the Mao Yenrai. Okay, so it's like the guy who trained him in Vicious. Then I'm like, oh, okay. Because at first I was just thinking like, are they gonna have that at some point? Like, hey, son, how you doing? Like Kurt Russell comes out or something like that.
Kurt Russell, dad?
I was wondering where that was leading at first. And because also they kept talking about like, because in the show, Vicious and Spike aren't brothers.
No, but they're adopted. They make a point they're adopted brothers.
Yeah,
I guess they're not even that.
Because at first they're just talking about like, oh, it's like Spike, Spike Vicious, it's your brother and whatnot. I was like, what, brother? I'm like, like in all the years of watching Cowboy Bebop, I don't remember them being brothers. I mean, I know they grow up together and so on like that. But then it's like, yeah, in the script later on, it does kind of do it more like, oh no, it's just like they're training brothers,
Here's the way I pieced it together, and maybe some of this was just the dubbing company filling in blanks on the back of a DVD box and just bullshitting. Who knows? But the way I always took it was Spike was somebody who lived a rough life, lived on the streets. Mao Yenrai saw him, gave him a chance, and gave him an opportunity and trained him. Vicious was somebody who kind of came from a similar background, but had no aim, had no place to go, really, and he went to war. And when he came back to war, he and Spike met and had a sense of camaraderie. And Spike brought him into the Red Dragon Syndicate, and that's how Spike came across Julia. That's how he met Julia, because she was originally with Vicious. And then from there, that love triangle happens, and then things just descend into madness. That's the way I always took that. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some vital information I'm missing, or maybe I mixed some things up. But that's kind of the way I always understood it, is they met each other like when they were probably like in their like early 20s, give or take.
Yeah. Where in this one here, it's like they've trained together since they were like 5 years old or whatever.
And the thing about that, the only thing is, because Vicious, the thing about Vicious is, I like Vicious, and I still like him in this, but the only thing is, Vicious is always been like a crazy, merciless cunt. He's gonna fucking kill and do whatever he can to get by, and he's not somebody who really stands on ceremony. He thinks a lot of that shit is outdated, but in this, he's all about ceremony in the old-fashioned ways, where he'll still do whatever he can to get what he wants. But at the same time, I guess when you hear, like, he's a guy who had nothing, and then suddenly he kind of worked his way up and started getting everything. When you hear that, like, in this version, oh, he was, all right, at age 5, he was adopted. Those first 5 years of life were rough. But after that, he was living with basically the richest man in the universe. And so suddenly there's a lot less kind of sympathy, because as a guy who as a guy who came from the bottom and worked his way up, you can kind of see this whole thing, like, dog eat dog world, like, fuck you, I'm going to kill whoever I have to get by in this world, because I had to do that to get by. You didn't have to be there. You didn't have to do that. I did. I can kind of see that more from that perspective. This version, I'm a little bit more of kind of like, you're kind of a spoiled rich kid.
Yeah, that's sort of how he comes. He comes across as like the Damien, almost of the family, like fighting, Dick Grayson or Tim Drake more than anything else. Like, has that sort of feel.
He kind of does, and he doesn't. There's no point where he's like, "Father, I'm gonna." He more like, because by this point, Mao Yenrai, he's like, "Look, so here's the thing. We are a crime syndicate. We had to do some horrible, bad shit to make things running. But you know what? We went through 2 world wars. During that time, there was complete anarchy and chaos when we started colonizing, going to other worlds. We kind of had to do what we had to do to get by. Things are starting to normalize now, and now we're trying to make up for that. So we kind of cut deals with other crime families, and we're trying to slowly normalize things and try to make things run smoothly. But Vicious just sees, like, no, you're weak. You're giving up so much of this power. Like, well, too much of this power will corrupt people. We got to divvy it up and kind of keep each other in check. Mm-hmm. And Vicious is like, no, that's old dated bullshit. And then because they're having this at a meeting. Like, I thought you'd be happy to see me. What the fuck? And then he's basically saying, watch yourself, old man. I'm coming for you, that chair. And then you have Julia there watching as well. So I think by then we saw her in a flashback or something.
Yeah, she's come back in a couple of those kind of flashbacks and so on by this point. But it does actually, like, I mean, granted, I know it's like when you got a singular movie, you're like, well, we're going to focus more on our Vicious character and make him seem kind of, because it's like, when you think about, like, in the Cowboy Bebop show, like, Vicious is only there, like, out of, like, the whole run of it, he's really only there for, like, a very minor part. Though it's obviously
6 or 7 episodes. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and even, like, a couple of them, he's only there, like, real short. And so on. So it's like, I mean, I think here it's just like they're kind of adding him in there and just kind of making him like I'm the rightful heir. Like, he almost just reminds me, like, almost like in this one, that he would have like that almost like over the top sort of British accent. You're like, but I'm the heir to the throne here of the Red Dragons.
I could still kind of, I didn't take him as much as that. I mean, that's more of kind of like, that's sort of how it comes across to some extent. But at the same time, to me, he came across more as like, I mean, that's at his core, yeah. But I guess performance-wise, it came across more of kind of like how he does in the show. And it's his whole thing is like, look, we basically, whoever runs the oil and the gas runs the universe. Mm-hmm. And we're all divvied up. You divvied up all the gas and all that among all these different corporations. Why'd you do that? You could have had it all. So he makes a point he wants, and he does it. I think we don't need to go on a big deal about this. Through like a terrorist plot, he and Yudai basically use a drone to destroy the Russian supply, maybe someone else's supply, and so it makes their stock in the oil and gasoline and whatnot that much higher. And his other point is he wants to go down the list. What he ends up doing, he puts Spike's name on the bounty list, which is the plot point I was saying. That's pretty interesting. I'm surprised they never do that in the show, or the animated movie. Because that right there, he says, like, well, Spike is technically the next one in line, and he's actually still alive out there. So if I can go and kill, if I was to come and do a coup right now, everybody would be against me. But if I take out everyone if I take out everyone who stands between me and them, they have no choice but to follow me.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing. He's almost just trying to take everything over, and it's weird how it almost even has like this like gas kind of crisis shortage. It's like, oh, they're all in space, but for some reason, Jesus, we still need that gas 300 years from now.
I guess we're just getting out of the Iraq, or the Iraq War is still happening at this time.
Yeah.
So it's still kind of like, we're over there for gas, you know?
Yeah, so it has a little bit like it's tied into like that kind of feel and whatnot, because that's really what it is. Like the big thing is like, oh, if we control the gas, we control outer space, you know? And then
Which sounds goofy, but when you think about it, no, it makes sense because they need that for heating, and they need that to get from ship to go to place.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, that controls so many things, you know. It's like World War One, you know. You're not going to be able to power your tanks and your battleships without it, and so on. And that's the same thing in space. You're not going to be able to have your ships and all those other things and planets that need it. So all this kind of mining and, you know, whatnot. And it's kind of like multitudes of stuff, because sometimes they're like going for like methane type gases and other kinds of different like space gas and what have you. But yeah, when they throw that bounty on Spike, they make it like 400 million wulongs or whatnot like that, and people are like, what the fuck? That can't be right. That's got to be like a typo. Nobody has it like that. But because they made it so high, all of a sudden, that's when you start getting these scenes where these bounty hunters are just coming after Spike. And it's almost like a good detergent anyways for like Vicious, because it's like, hey, that's just going to send all these other random ass bounty hunters are going to go after the Bebop and whatnot, and that's going to keep them distracted. And that's where even when there's that scene where they pretty much get like in the Millennium Falcon like turret guns and just start blasting space pirates out.
That part, yeah. And that all I was going to say, people were talking about looking into this movie. Now looking through the scripts, I mean, I'm like, man, this thing, it took a while to read. It's not that the story's that long. It's just the action scenes are very dense. That's almost kind of like the thing about it. I mean, it's long enough. It doesn't feel short.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel too like bombarded, but it's just the action scenes are really spaced out. So that's when the reading's like, oh, it took a little longer to read than expected. But anyway,
well, that just like everything's kind of like well detailed. Like it's, you know, it's not just like Spike walked across the room. Like it explains it in a paragraph every single time, and not in a bad way either. It never feels like too overly wordy. I felt like it was still solid the whole way through. Not like one of those ones where you're like, yo, you could have cut some words out here, buddy.
Not like the Ninja Turtle script where every 5 sentences someone's eye fucking someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
But like literally, it's something like he's eye fucking him. This is gonna be a PG movie. But what was I gonna say? No, there's something that while looking up this movie before actually reading the script and looking up just like things on the script and people's responses, whenever it comes up to like Vicious wanting to control the oil and gas in the galaxy, people will just kind of dismiss it like, so Vicious wants to control the gas for, I don't know, reasons. It's like he wants to become head of a fucking crime syndicate. I mean, I know that was never a plot point in the show, but it's at the same time, and like, he seems like someone who would do anything he can do to be running the show.
Yeah.
And that, if it came to that, I can see him definitely pulling some shit like that in it. Because at the time in the show, he was a footman trying to work his way up the ranks.
Yeah, and to me, like, I don't see anything wrong with that plot point. I think that's that thing that someone they read that part, but they obviously didn't read the script, so they didn't see the rest of it, that why it sort of is. But they take like one sentence where like Vicious wants to be a gas, corporate leader with like a giant cowboy hat and driving a white Cadillac and everything. I think that's what they just picture him as.
We decided
like he's the old
cast
Texas,
Vicious as Boss Hog.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? But it's like goes with many of the things. Never just read the headline. Make sure you read the entire thing, because I feel like that does work. And for a movie, like, yeah, granted, I feel like it needs to be, you have a little bit different, because once again, you're summing it all up into one picture, and so on. So I think it kind of makes sense to sort of do it that way. And like, it's like, that's fine. That works. I mean, gas, it just seems kind of weird to be like a couple hundred years in the future and be like, oh yeah, that gas though, God forbid, we never figured out that electric thing. That's probably the reason why the Earth kind of exploded at one point.
Well, Tesla's
we realized that electricity and solar power, that was destroying us even more. We had to go back to gas.
Oil, baby, oil. Yeah, no, but it's also one of those things like, well, if you look at Teslas, they do break down a lot. So like, fuck it.
Yeah, and those batteries, that's the one thing people don't think about. Like, they just throw them in a landfill. They can't really recycle them super well. So, yeah, that's apparently what destroyed Earth, and that's why we had to go move to Mars.
And then, like, through there, that's where they get this big, like, earlier, like, that's where they you talk about the Millennium Falcon asteroid battle. Because they end up going through, like, an asteroid battle at some point, trying to get away from
space
bounty hunters. Other bounty hunters and space pirates that want the bounty on Spike. And at some point, they go to the truck stop that VT, the trucker lady, was at in the show, Heavy Metal Queen. Mm-hmm. They go there and they go to, like, they go to this 1950s diner. At this point, they don't really trust, I don't know if this is before or after where Jet pulls Faye aside. Like, look, if you ever tell him this, I will fucking kill you. I don't care if you're a woman. But here's exposition. Basically all the stuff you already said about Spike, how he got him an escape pod, and then he started bringing in money, helping him with bounties to kind of pay off his debt and all that to him. Mm-hmm. They go into that. I don't remember if it was before or after this, but they stop at like a 1950 space diner, and I want to say somewhere in there, I remember some episode there were like hologram like waiters, but they kind of make it across. Well, it's an American movie, so probably have the money for the likenesses. So the hologram waiters are Marilyn Monroe, John Wayne, James Dean. Like Tarantino would have loved this scene.
Yeah, exactly. It really was like straight out of Pulp Fiction almost, but just in the future. Jack Rabbit Slim.
Some point when they're going over the when they're covering through the different like flashbacks of Spike winning bounties, they cover Abdul Hakim, which is the guy who had, based off Abdul Hakim Jabbar.
Yeah.
But the guy who had Ein in, I think, episode 2 or 3.
Yeah, I saw that too, because that popped up. I was like, oh, yeah, that's awesome.
I think he should have been like the third or fourth guy with Vicious.
Yeah, that would have been kind of cooler, because that guy would have been a much better choice, I almost think. But
rather than just like the young version of like one of those crusty old fucks.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones. At least he still had that little bit of a cameo, though.
Yeah, that's better than nothing. Or like maybe if there's a scene, because they do fight off a couple bounty hunters, so maybe there's a scene where they fight him even. But at least that he was there for just a moment, So that's one of those things that, even though he's just in a quick little flashback, hey, he's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, for sure. But I guess going back to that, they're at the 1950s, You know what it actually really reminds me of for some reason? This is what I picture, like in Spaceballs, like at the very end when they go to fill up, when they're kind of leaving it, they're at that diner, when they have like the alien scene and whatnot. Like, I don't know why, like that's in my head, that's what I pictured them landing at. Like the Bebop's parked there, the Millennium Falcon's there, the Winnebago.
That's what comes to mind too. Let me ask you this before we go too much further. When you were reading this, did you imagine it as like a episode of the show or like animated, or did you imagine it more as like recasting it in your head?
When I pictured it totally animated. It sounds weird. It actually read more like an anime than it did like a live action show. Like it felt more like or I'll even say like if it's American, it felt like it read more cartoon than it read like live action. And I don't mean that like in a bad way, but it just felt like it was straight up like I think the guy was literally just writing it like almost like he was writing the next series of Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of going back and forth depending on like the scene. Like there were moments where I was trying to imagine Keanu Reeves. I was having trouble placing Jet, but Idris Elba just slipped in there for some reason as Jet, which I think that works too.
Yeah.
I know he doesn't look anything like him, but I just think that kind of imposing, like just give him kind of a little bit more of a scruff and make him look a little more worn down. I think he definitely do that kind of role. But there's another guy playing him in the Netflix show, and then the person that I actually imagined for Faye is actually the person they casted for the Netflix show, which is she's in a lot of other stuff, but she is like the Mexican girl from the newest Jurassic World movie.
Oh, the kind of obnoxious character from the Jurassic World movie?
Yeah.
Not that girl, is it?
She's better in other movies.
Okay, because I say in Jurassic World, because I remember that was just like the character was just like oh, we got one of these garbage characters showing up that just has to be like, how the hell did she even get a job there? You know what I mean? Like, one of those people that just is always like shit talking everybody.
She's better in other movies, but and it's not even that she's bad in that movie. It was just the character they wrote.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying necessarily she is, but that character, that was like one of those characters, just like, oh, here's one of those obnoxious ones. At least she's only in the beginning of it, but
beginning and then part of the end for a second.
Oh,
but,
yeah, that's true, I guess.
She's like, I helped the raptor, so but beyond that, she's got. I was able to picture her as Faye because she looks like the part. I could see that,
It's kind of weird because like I always picture. I mean, I know these characters kind of go anywhere, but like whenever I see anime, I picture a lot of those ones as being more Japanese. I would have pictured her instead to be a Japanese person. I mean, like Keanu Reeves, he's perfect. I feel because you can kind of. I mean, I know that people think that sounds kind of weird. But I'm like, I could totally see that, but I do feel like I don't know, like Faye. I feel like I almost picture her more like being like a Japanese person. But I know some people don't picture like anime characters like that.
I can see Faye going either way. I can see Faye as being, white, Mexican, or Asian. Kind of, I can see her being that either way. Spike, I'm not picky on any. Like, they have to be one of these three things. I'm not picky about that at all. But when it comes to Spike, I imagine him being white or Asian. That comes to mind for me. I don't know. It doesn't have to be anything in particular because nothing about him says he has to be this or that. Other than I even think Spike Spiegel. That sounds like a made up name to me. I don't even think that's his real name.
Yeah. No.
So, Jill Valentine. That's not even. I'm Jill Valentine. Jill.
Faye Valentine.
Who's Jill Valentine?
That's
Faye
Resident
Valentine,
Evil.
yeah.
That's Resident Evil.
I think there's a character named Jill Valentine. Oh, Jill Valentine from like Resident Evil. Yeah, Faye Valentine. She even like that might even be that's her real name actually. No, because an old lady comes up like, is that Faye? Faye?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Faye! Yeah, that is her real name. Never mind. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And I will say, even though I noticed a little bit farther on, because I was wondering if they were going to keep the Faye Valentine, like she's been frozen for like 100 years type thing. And they even have that, like, at one point when she, like, breaks down and, like, or not breaks down, but, like, when the rule number 2 breaks, it's like, okay, everybody can explain their past now. She explains that kind of, like, where it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, I was frozen for, like, 100 years, and, a con artist guy took me out and said he knew me forever and so on, but just left my debts. And it kind of like, explains it better like that. But the short and sweet of that kind of episode is all kind of put in there. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, because I felt like that was something that, like, if they didn't put in the script, I wouldn't have been like, I'm like, that's not the biggest deal, because I know that that might seem a little convoluted, like, to try to fit somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine when you got a stretched out show and so on, but like in a movie, like, if you didn't, in a sense, say Faye's backstory, I don't think it's like the worst thing. Or if you even summed it up even simpler. But the fact that they did have it in there, I was like, oh, that actually is kind of neat.
Yeah, no, that was cool. I was surprised with that. I was thinking they were going to do that. And they even talk about there's whatever episode she's introduced in, which I think is 3 or 4, where they go to the casino space colony. And in this, it's right outside Mars, and it has the whole thing where it's like a space colony that has a hologram of roulette going around it. Aside from the fact they go to that for a big action set piece, in that episode, they talk about, have you heard the legend of Poker Alice? And then, like, Faye's like, oh, yeah, whatever, Poker Alice. And the bad guy of that episode, who's the guy running the casino, is all saying, oh, yeah, she was, like, the best card player and this and that. And they basically, she's the one in the movie re-explaining it, but implying, oh, it's me. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to go about it. And in the show, it was just some, like, folklore story. In this, though, like, oh, she is Poker Alice. Okay.
Yeah, she that was, like, one of her kind of, like, cons that she sort of had to pay off that debt.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. And then they do have a little bit of this tension between, like, Faye, like, they don't know, like, can we trust Faye? Is she going to turn Spike in? Is she going to screw us over? So there's a little bit of that. But we should say, during the shootout at the 50s diner, first off, VT is across the diner saying, you fucking bounty hunting scum, fuck all you, just like,
I love how, because like, without like the context of like the episode, though, it just makes it out like, God, like, if you were just watching me, like, who's that shitty old lady just like bitching at these people? Like, they didn't say a single word to her, and she's just over there just being like almost like she's just like 15 drinks too far in. Be like, let me tell you who I fucking hate.
It's like, cut her off. Like, we don't serve alcohol. I don't know why she's acting like this. Like,
she's fucking hopped up on milkshakes. Don't put no bourbon or rum in there? No, God, no.
It's a $7 milkshake. Fuck.
Fucking space
no, there is
prices.
also, there is the, during that, they also make it imply there's the second to last episode. Sorry, I hope I'm not coming across as like that guy. Like, season 3, episode 24, minute 23. You know, like but I just, there's like, those episodes just really stand out to you. The second to last episode where Spike encounters, I don't remember which one is which, Shin or Shun. I don't fucking remember which one is which. But the younger brother to the guy who got killed halfway through the series, and he comes in and says like, yo, Vicious is coming in for you, and they kind of like got each other's backs for a minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's kind of like totally made. There's that scene in the 50s diner where they combine. I just like how they manage to combine certain scenes, but it doesn't feel like just totally a rehash. They take the scene he has like in the beginning of like the second to last episode where he helps Spike. Jet gets shot, so he can't do anything for those episodes for a while. So that comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it kind of like that whole like shootouts kind of going on down there and whatnot, and then they got to kind of escape out, and they even grab VT and just say like, "Hey, let's get the fuck out of here" and whatnot. I even like because he even has that moment where like the bacon's flying through the air and Spike like grabs it out and like starts eating it like in that. He does that in an episode where there's like food flying in the air during a shootout at one point and grabs it.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you what
Probably
episode that one was, but, you know, I saw them like, oh, there we go, and whatnot, and so on. And even VT comes along later, even though she just talks, like, you know, trash on them the whole time. For some reason, like, her and Jet become friends as time goes on, because later on he makes a phone call into her.
You got gusto or whatever. Well, they kind of, even though the shootout happens because of them, they kind of look out for her as they get out of there. Mm. He says like, yeah, don't bother thanking us for saving your life. Like you brought you brought all the drama here. What you were raised wrong if you think I owe you an apology. He's like, yeah, she's got a point.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, maybe next time we won't save you. Just fucking saying.
But then as they're trying to get away, I think they're getting attacked by more people, and then they're going through like another like. Whenever they're like we're heading for an asteroid field, I just hear the dun 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 like that shit's happening. They're going through a junkyard. Yeah, they're going through a junkyard. They got a bunch of like
porta potties flying out there and so on.
Yeah, and then at some point though, this giant like vacuum like trucker oil rig ship comes through and swallows it like it's a fucking whale, and which must be fucking big, because I always imagine the Bebop being pretty fucking big.
Yeah, I mean, then, the Bebop's like a I feel like the size of like a boat ship, you know what I mean? And so this other thing comes by just like dun dun dun, just sucking it up.
And then like they get on the radio, it's like VT, and she's like, oh yeah, I saw you guys on the thing. I saw you guys on the thing now. So because they're like in a big like thing of oil slick. There's just like this space junkyard, just junk in space, and I feel like that's kind of a reference. Maybe I'm mixing things up here, but I feel like that might be a reference to the chess player Hex episode, because weren't they living like in a space junkyard, like a colony that was surrounded by junk, or maybe asteroids? I don't remember which one was which, but
that sounds kind of familiar. That could be the case.
It could have been junk or it could have been asteroids, but either way, it just gave me made me think of that. But so basically, they're just kind of chilling inside the Bebop, inside this giant oil rig thing, until they're like closer to Mars, and she's like, you know what? It's all good. Like we'll pay it back one day or whatever. It's like it's all good. I just sucked up all this oil, and I'm looking at prices. I'm fucking set.
Yeah, exactly. Like my oil stocks are going through the roof.
And then like what happens after that? They're coming up to to Mars, and then they're going to the space colony, and that's where I think somewhere in there Faye has her whole spiel about her past and whatnot.
Yeah, at this point they must be going to that casino part too. Because I want to say that's the next thing is they go to casino because Spike was gonna meet with Mao, but it's kind of like somewhat of a trap as well, and then of course Vicious.
Like Mao's not Mao. Yeah, Mal's not setting up the trap, but he knows where Spike's gonna go.
Yeah, but Vicious knows and whatnot, and then even this is where Vicious like kills Mal before Spike. I think before Spike can see him, or does Spike see him?
No, Spike sees him, and they have a conversation.
Okay,
they have a conversation, and then as Spike's leaving, Vicious kills him, and he's like, "We thought you were dead all these years. You have no idea what we would have done." And he's also there because he thinks Julia's there too.
Yeah.
So,
well, because he does meet Julia when he's at the casino thing, and Julia says that, like, Spike, you know where to meet me at. You know, like, we don't have to explain. She gives him almost like the Shawshank Redemption speech, you know, like you'll know where it's at. Remember where we buried that?
Remember that time we had that one conversation? Like, was that a Dunkin' Donuts? I don't fucking remember.
Yeah, like which one? Like, you know, that was like 10 years ago. But because he meets her in there and so on, and then of course there is another like whole big old shootout action scene that kind of goes down the casino, which actually would be a pretty sweet spot because, you know, they have all the 3D gaming going on, and you would have had neat kind of special effects, I think, that would have worked well.
The pacing in this movie is really good with the action. Like, there is a lot of like, let's sit down and talk and do a little bit of like detective and noir-y kind of stuff, but there is a lot of cool action in this, and it's paced out very well and cool action set pieces.
Yeah, it's very balanced between like the talking and the action scenes. Because something that always kind of bothers me in like certain, like, you know, generally when you have like an action movie that's kind of like those standard big budget, you know, blockbuster ones where it's like, they do like, there's an action scene at the beginning, and then you got to wait till the middle, and then after that, you got to wait till the very end before you get that really big one. And those ones in the beginning and the middle are kind of short, you know. Where this one's like, it's balanced. It's like every 10 minutes or so, there's almost like another nice action scene to kind of keep you going.
I feel like that was really popular from like 2005 to 2008 or so. Just like the one big action scene here, and then maybe one at the end, or like there always is one at the end, one at the beginning, one at the end, maybe the middle. Like, yeah. I feel like that's the Pirates of the Caribbean movies were for like after the first one.
Yeah, the Transformers movies do that. I mean that's kind of the classic old-fashioned way to do action scenes. Is, you know, the proto like Chinese kung fu era is that you do a couple little action scenes, and then you have one big one at the end, you know, and then once kind of like you let like Hong Kong kind of come in, then you can have action like every 5 minutes.
And the reason they were able to get in the casino in the first place, because they don't want to go through certain sections, because Spike, since he has his aside from the fact he has the bounty on him, there's a bunch of crooked cops in the area, and they don't want to go through the main access because they're gonna get scanned, so they want to go through the back access, through the workshop area, and through there they're surrounded by prison security. Like, hey, you guys can't park here. Like, oh no, we want to tune up and whatever. Like, well, there's a line, so go to the back of the line and get registered in there first. And that's where Faye rolls her eyes and just says, "Tell the head of security that
you're bringing in Poker Alice."
Poker Alice, yeah, that's right, Poker Alice. And like, oh shit, so this is the place she embezzled a bunch of money from and all that. And this is also, I think, where they say that Spike and Faye first met. If not here, is another casino.
Yeah, so it seems like that's where he met her. Like, oh, met her at a casino. She was stealing money from some poor schmucks.
Yeah. And then from there, so even though she's going through security.
I love how there's these action scenes going on, and then it keeps cutting back every once in a while, and like Jet's just outside with like the pressure washer, like literally, you know, washing shit up the side of the Bebop from all like that like dumpster field they went through. And it will cut back multiple times. So I just imagine like this big action, like ba 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 ba, explosion, 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 and then Jet's just out there like, put on my Robert Johnson record and out here and watch the Bebop.
He's out there doing that, and like Faye basically is kind of working as a diversion for security because they're after her. So they go in there, and Spike's like, "I'm bringing her in," and they're just, since it's this casino, they're so focused on her because this is public enemy number one for this casino. Like, we want this bitch, and then that's once he's bringing her in, that's where they work together and they knock a bunch of tasers out of the hands of the security guards. They get through, and then Spike's like, "I'm gonna go handle my thing, you go handle your thing, whatever you gotta do." So she's basically just kind of keeping them busy, and Spike is going after Mao Yenrai and Julia, and he basically has a little bit of a brief reunion with Mao. And I have this I like that little scene where he goes in there and he sees like he sees a couple of his bodyguards. They pull guns on him, and there's like 3 guards. 2 of the older guys pull the guns away, like Spike. And he's like, "Hey Johnny, you put on a little weight." And sees like a younger guy there. He's like, "Is that Billy Flowers' kid?" You know, then or something like that.
Yeah. No, I remember he mentions it, something like that. And yeah, he kind of goes in there, gets all kind of set up like that while, you know, Faye's going on. And this is the part, too, where I think that Faye starts doing some things that I feel like could have been, like, if Ed was in here, Ed would take over. Because she starts hacking some, like, computers and so on like that. You know, and Faye in the show is always like, fuck computers. But this one's like, oh, well, I guess we'll sort of combine the Faye and Ed character together through the little bit of a fusion dance. Kind
of a little bit of that, because she's, like... She's basically, I think she's pulling up some files that they need or something to that effect. And then in that time, yeah, Spike goes after Julia, meets up with Julia. They get some information. And this is where Jet kind of gets another moment, but he's not like punching anybody, but he's flying. He realized what's happening, that big shootout happens. Vicious is there. He's using this opportunity to corner Spike and kill him. But he instead, like, Jet kind of realized what's happening, so he gets in...
he gets in, like, Faye's ship, right?
Ship. He doesn't have the hammerhead in this, I guess. I guess it's only the Bebop, the Swordfish, and the Redtail. So he doesn't have his own ship, unfortunately, other than the Bebop. But anyway, and he ends up driving that thing through some like tight ass elevator shafts, crashing. He's like flying it through the casino. So I'm sure like. Well, we're reading this like, oh, this looks cool, and some producer's like, fuck, that's gonna be expensive.
Yeah, those are because I will say like because a lot of these scripts we sort of read, it's like the Mario Brothers one where you can kind of see like. There's tons of cool scenes, but every cool scene, I think that's always the thing that sometimes like certain people don't get, like that all costs money. You know what I mean? And at some point you gotta drop it because this thing does. Yeah, the idea of flying a ship through a casino, shooting things along the way, like this is a sweet action scene, and it does actually give. You know,
it is part of the show because I want to say there is at some point someone crashes something through a like open window and like frost kind of forms around it so it doesn't like suck everything out, almost something kind of like that.
Yeah, but it gives Jet that extra kind of action scene, even though he's flying it. But that is pretty badass. Gives him the distraction so that Spike and Faye can leave, and as even they're leaving, like Faye steals.
They hop on it like Sonic on the tornado.
Yeah.
At some point, they're like on top of the ship, riding it as he's flying through like these elevator shafts and down like these big ass halls in the ship. And he's going in reverse too, so
it's like looking over his shoulder, just backing it up.
Just like I just imagine just being casual, like an arm over the chair, looking over his shoulder with a beep beep beep. Like he's just like no big deal.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and at some point, Faye steals like pretty much like Julia's like tablet phone thingamajig. And whatnot.
Yeah, that's right. She has a moment. They have a little fuck you moment.
Yeah, be like, Spike's mine, just Spike's mine. You know, like one of those. Like there's just that little bit of like, Julie, you're no good for him. You know, Spike needs a con artist woman like me, not the con artist woman like you.
It's not even that. It's more of like she was trying to steal her phone so she could figure something out, and she kind of like fucks with her. Like Julia's like at a playing table, is like at a craps table or something, and she's like, "It looks like I ran out of luck. Like you must have used it all when you were a little younger." Just, you know, a little backhanded compliment like that. It's like, all right, you know, fucking bitch. Walks away. Says, "Oh, by the way, you got your money back. Like, thank you. You are a honorable person." I'm like, "Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you." And he takes the phone like, "Fucking bitch," you know, walking away. Which I'll say this. And it's not like, oh, you ruined the core of the show. I don't think this movie, unfortunately, I don't think it really does Julia any justice, because I don't think it really makes her a strong character. I mean, people can say in the show she is just a femme fatale stereotype or whatever, but at least she came across as a strong character, where she seems like someone who can be easily manipulated or arm twist. Like there's a moment in the original show where where Vicious wants her to kill Spike, and she can't bring herself to do it, so she goes on the run herself. But the whole time she's been working with the crime syndicate and just been kind of going through the motions. And she does have a little bit of regret. Like she's like, I wanted to work my way up to the throne like a lot of other people, but it's just not worth it without you. That being said, she doesn't really stand out. She's not really a strong character in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think every character always needs to be a strong character.
No.
You know what I mean? Some characters just kind of are. Like, she just reminds me of someone who got kind of involved and has no real way of knowing how to get out properly and so on. And really, at the same time, when you got someone like Vicious looming over you, it's kind of like, well, I don't know, Vicious, he's got that grudge built up.
Yeah, he never lets go of it, you know.
Yeah.
But the thing about it, I guess, because she always came across as such like a strong character in the show, and the thing is, she was like, you could understand why Spike would go out of his way for this character in the show. You know what I mean? And there is that kind of nice moment of camaraderie between her and Faye in the show as well. But, and I'm not expecting it to be beat for beat, moment for moment. I think this script does a pretty good job of like picking and choosing and knowing where to like kind of like throw in their own thing and knowing when to pull back and lean into other things. But I do think that Julia, they kind of dropped the ball on a little bit, not enough to ruin the movie or like make me dislike the script, but I did feel like that compared to her the anime counterpart, she was just kind of like, because Faye just says, well, what was she like? Because at some point she's talking to Jet. What's she like? Normal, in a very boring kind of normal, which is what kind of threw Faye off. And I guess that's just the thing. Like, Spike wants something normal.
Well, I think that is because in this lifestyle, when everybody's over the top and when people are, killing each other and like, backstabbing and so on, like, which realistically, what is she? There's nothing normal about her. She works for a crime syndicate.
And like data and all that. But I guess it's like somebody who
they make it out like she's on like a farm or something like that, and she's like, hanging up laundry or something like that.
It's like
at the end of like
runs
a John
stand
Wayne
at a
movie.
farmer's market selling homemade candles or some shit. No.
Yeah, like
no, but
like that to me, like when you use the word like normal, that's what I sort of would picture. You know what I mean? Like somebody coming home after the war. And being like, it's not one of them floozy women. It's a normal one that knows how to do the laundry.
Well, I also feel like it's one of those things where she comes in like a she was like that's the thing. She was a femme fatale type character in the show, but she wasn't like scantily clad. She didn't have to use that to get by like Faye does. Mm-hmm. She was like a hard ass lady who could do whatever, who could just figure it out, But in this, she comes across more as a lady who. She was probably going to be an accountant, met up with Vicious on a date, got a job opportunity, and just fell deeper and deeper and deeper. You know what I mean? Because she's like data statistics or something like that for the crime syndicate, something to that effect.
Yeah, she's got like some kind of computer secretary job thing going on. And maybe that's sort of it. Is in this world, she's like almost like the money penny to this section, and it's just like she's kind of like, even though she is working for a crime syndicate, she isn't, maybe she's not necessarily as much in there. But I will say, like, in this script I think because you are kind of just introduced to these characters, if you kind of, especially if you didn't know like the previous show, you might be kind of like not.
It is a little speed run, but they expand on things the show didn't expand on, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
But I'll say there is one little thing I forgot to mention. One of the other things is Spike said, like, when they're going to the casino, they know Julia's there. So Faye's like, you got to bring that bitch in or I will. So that's another thing. And Spike chooses not to bring her in. And that's where there's a little bit of animosity between him and the rest of the things. Like, hey, just go drop me off over at the place that I know. Hopefully we're talking about the same place here, but because it was a conversation we had 10 years ago, so God fucking knows. But
the other big thing too is like, not only does Spike have the 400 million Wulongs bounty, there's one also on her as well too. And the whole reason they threw that on there is they knew that would attract, or Vicious knew that would attract Spike to kind of go after, at least to save her necessarily, but then he would still know he's going after her and whatnot. So there's that, and that's why Faye's kind of pissed, being like, yo, that's 400 million Wulongs, what the fuck? And then there's that scene that's like, okay, once they kind of leave there, and there's the action scene, and, Jet's backing up to the Bebop and whatnot, and they get out of there and escape, and then they're going to Earth or whatnot. There is that part where they drop, like, Spike off, and they're like, I don't know if I want to just drop him off. Well, hey, Jet, you gonna push the shutter door release? Maybe don't feel like it. Like, just gonna sit here and play poker with the woman, And just bitch about things that we don't like.
And I thought that was kind of funny because like the whole scripts, Faye and Jet, just like in the show, barely ever get along. And like, you know what? He said he's not coming back, so X, Y, and Z. So they already, you see they're like, when they cut back to them later, they have like different suits of his boots, knives, guns, like just shit. They're like trying to play over, which I think that's kind of funny. That's a very moment from the show, I think. And this right here, it's definitely pulling from like the last episodes of the show, but doing it differently. Mm-hmm. As they go down, they're going back to Earth, and I'm thinking, there's only like 20 pages yet. That's not enough time to fit in Ed, and if they don't do that, I was thinking about for a second, but probably not.
Yeah, I was almost expecting by this point, if there was going to be an Ed scene, it was literally going to be at the last page.
Cameo.
He was gonna, or she was gonna come flying in like Tails at the end of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
Yeah, something like that, or like, yeah. And then
or there's just gonna be some little girl playing chess, on a computer screen or something like, something small like that. I thought there was gonna be.
Or like they just have like a brief. We also added a new member to our team or whatever. Takes care of the dog,
Yeah, takes care of the dog. Fuck the dog. Takes care of the dog.
I think it'd be funny. Oh, I'd be funny if they did something like, well, we originally just hired her as a dog walker because Spike and Faye weren't gonna do it, and Jet still had his fucked up ankle, and she never left.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so they're going there, like Jet and Faye are all kind of pissed that like Spike says he's not coming back, but Spike's just, he's doing his thing. So he gets dropped off and he goes down to Shanghai, or the old remains of Shanghai, because that apparently is the spot. Old Shanghai.
Oh yeah, old Shanghai.
Remember where they shot Indiana Jones, the Temple of Doom, at the beginning? That's the spot.
That very same bar. What was that? Like anything goes. That thing. Yeah, we always had to kind of go in that old like that. That place is real. It wasn't a set. Yeah.
Yeah. So they
end up going down there. Yeah, they go down there and they have the whole part where the city is kind of flooded in because of global warming. There's like radiation rain, all this kind of shit. And the picture they paint is interesting because it's like,
well, it's also, I think the war is what's really destroyed so much of the stuff too.
Yeah, and it's also like there's like bridges leading from rooftop to rooftop because of all the flooding and all that. Because like, oh wow, people live inside these old buildings, which I'll say. There's a lot of, they make points that, as the action scene this happens, more stuff goes on. This is also, I think, that point where, remember there's that period, basically from Matrix, I mean, probably there's even some before Matrix, but Matrix up until like 2012 maybe, there was a lot of movies where you would just have like action scenes in gutted buildings. Like here's an abandoned building. I mean, I guess it was A, cheaper to make for a set, B, it was also like, well, I guess you explain why, the cops don't show up right away, or this is where these people would be hanging out if there was some illegal shit happening. But there was like that period for a while in movies where everything was gutted buildings. And apparently every room in this, aside from like her communications room and her greenhouse, is all gutted building.
I mean, that's even like, you can even go as far back as the end of True Lies has that. That's like the last. Yeah. They're going up a gutted building to get to the top. You know what I mean? And I think that's sort of what it is, because I think you could kind of rent out a building pretty easy where it's like, hey, we're working on this movie. Well, we'll give you, so amount of money if we can use your building to shoot some stuff. And, worst case scenario, if we destroy the walls, you could just paint over it, Yeah. Because you haven't painted yet.
And they get there, and, so he flies down there, and he has his moment with Julia, and they're just kind of like casually talking. And I do like this scene. Like, he at some point, even though she kind of is about to give in, but she doesn't, like, he puts his back to her, and he sees her reflection in, like, the teapot, and sees her pointing a gun to him. He's like, all right, I'll just let her kill me, because he's tired of running and doing that. And he sips the tea. He's like, hey, it's good tea. What'd you use? And he knows she's about to get shot, but then she doesn't do it. And then she's like, I'm sorry, I'm tired. This is a trap, this and that. And that's where that's where Faye and Jet check out Julia's phone that she stole. And there's a voicemail from like Vicious, like, hey, you know that plan we came up with to kill Spike? I'm on my way. Just keep him there, okay? Cool, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at some point, it's kind of somewhat of a reenactment to an extent of the scene that Spike and Julia have in the last episode of the series, which I think that took place on Mars on a rainy day. Maybe it didn't. I think it was Mars. It doesn't really matter either way, though, because it kind of gives you the era or of the same scene. It's pouring rain among all these buildings. It's scrapped. But they really expand on it. It's not a couple of gunshots. She, at some point, gets sniped. Mm-hmm. And Spike, at some point, jumps down into, like, the water, and he's swimming away from all the gunfire, has to struggle and find, like, a air pocket somewhere and has to break through, and then
even before that, there's like right before the gunfire breaks out, I think there's another kind of neat scene because Julia keeps talking about like, oh, I have this like greenhouse and I cook all these exotic vegetables and or grow all these exotic vegetables that you can't just get anywhere. And Spike's like, show me
pineapple.
Show me, yeah, like pineapple, like that pineapple I robbed from that poor girl. And blew up her house, but like they go up there and they're kind of having a nice moment in there and so on, and that's where like all the bullets kind of come in as they're taking fire and blasting away. You can just see this really cool action scene. That's where like she gets sniped like in her greenhouse and everything. So I thought that was kind of a cool place to be at, like on top of all these buildings in Shanghai, with all the bridges crossing and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. That is there's a lot of cool imagery in it, and so yeah, that's how it starts, and then eventually it leads down to him a very elaborate like chase shootout scene, and by this point Spike is all kind of disheveled because he knows I think we forgot to mention Vicious, after Spike spoke to Mao, Vicious kills Mao Yenrai, and then from there Spike is working his way through like a big long shootout, dealing with all these different Red Dragon Syndicate guys, and then on top of that, at some point he is actually kind of saved by Shin or whatever his name is. I think it was Shun, one of them. He's saved by one of them, and he doesn't die in the process. And then they kind of go down to this underground, like I guess ancient, old Red Dragon Syndicate like ceremony room.
It's like 600 years old or something. It says in there. I want to say.
Which I'm not gonna lie, I just got kind of like Mortal Kombat the movie vibes.
Well, I think so.
Feels in. That or the room. The room that like that Jason Lee fought in Dragon, a Bruce Lee story.
Yeah.
Where the guy kicks his back. Like one of those two things came to mind. One of those two rooms.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt like that, where they kind of get down there and there's just a bunch of mercenaries standing around him. It almost feels like that, and then somehow, some way, there's a sword just waiting for him there, and Vicious comes out of the shadows and whatnot. And they're gonna have this like epic sword fight down here, and it's like kind of like a mixed match of like sword fight and martial arts, because like they'll hit the swords a couple times, punch someone across the face, kick them in the stomach and whatnot. Like it actually sounded kind of sweet. I mean, it goes by actually quicker than like some of the other action in it. I don't know if it has that feeling that like, shit, they told me not to go over 121 pages. Let's fucking wrap this ship up. It has like the Nintendo Power comic feel about right here. Not like in a bad way, but like.
Well, to be fair, like here's the thing about the final fight in the series itself.
That is simple too.
It's very simple, but it's very badass. Mm-hmm. It's short, but it's very badass. Spike goes through a whole onslaught of all these guys. He faces off against Vicious. The roof of the building blew up for some reason, but whatever. And he gets there. Yeah. And he's still standing there, like, okay, whatever. And then like Spike's all fucked up. He points his gun at him. He fires at him, misses, and then runs up there. Vicious throws a knife. He rolls. He hits him in the back of the sword, and then few deflections, few shots. They swap weapons. They shoot. They slide him back, and they kill each other. Mm-hmm. So it is a very simple fight in the anime, but in this, it's probably not as simple, but it's kind of to the point. I think, like, you know what? You already got done with a couple big action scenes right before this.
Yeah, that is true, because there is like a extended one. I mean, like, it's probably about a page of like him and Vicious fighting, which would still be longer than almost anything else. And then it's like, they kind of go through it, and even Spike goes off this thing. He's like, your men around here, like, they only can respect, like, the mastery of, like, the true champion, which almost starts to sound like the martial arts movie kind of speech going on. Be like, believe me, if there's not, they're not just going to go for money or size or something like that. They're going to choose whoever's the true champion of, like, the Red Dragon, guild.
Yeah, because that's the thing, because Spike, they get across that Spike always beat Vicious. And the thing is, this is another thing I could see pissing people off, because Spike would never use swords. He just used guns really, and maybe occasionally a pair of nunchucks. But
which are now being auctioned off at that poker
yeah,
game.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
His Bruce Lee autographed nunchucks. Oh yeah, I'll put dibs on that.
Well, even that right there, though, I feel like that whole part was. I don't have a problem with Spike sword fighting, because I feel like if he had to, he would. You know, and even though he does not want to run the Red Dragon Clan, he doesn't want to do any of that shit. If it means he has to fight Vicious to make it all end, he'll do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think it's actually, I mean, I know he doesn't use the sword in, like, the show, but, like, I think that just, the idea of picturing Spike with a sword sounds cool. I don't think that's out of his wheelhouse, you know what I mean? I mean, and then in this script, they even explain it earlier, because when they show, like, you know, Vicious and him fighting at, like, 7 years old or whatnot, they show him with, like, kendo sticks and so on.
Yeah, yeah. And, so as the fight goes on, Spike basically beats Vicious. Vicious cheap shots him and pulls a gun out, shoots him in the leg. And then he's about to kill him. And then Spike says, hey guys, you know, so here's the thing. You're doing this whole thing about mastery, who's better, who has... And there's this oath that Vicious always says to himself throughout the script. And I don't have it right here in front of me, but it's some kind of like, he who does not kill his brother, da-da-da, whatever, you know. Anyway... So, they have this long fight. Not this long fight. They have this fight. Vicious pulls a cheap shot, and Spike says, so you guys are going to stand in all this tradition. We're fighting in a underground temple that is, like, well over 1,000 years old or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you're that close to following on, like, tradition. But you're going to pull out a tradition the second he does? Is this the guy you're going to follow? You know, and then, like...
Yeah, she's got a point. Like, jeez, I didn't think about that until he brought that up.
He's just like, all right, Spike, what you gonna do? Like, well, I'm doing nothing. I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife. Just ends like Clue. No, but like it just he just like then like just gets up and says, I'm taking Vicious with me, and then like, all right, I guess we'll just hang out here because we don't see those guys again. They're like, all right, I guess we're just hanging out here. But by that point, when they saw that it was a trap, I forgot to mention that Faye and Jet see it's a trap, they decide to go in and give Spike backup. And I think they get in a little bit of action here and there, and even Ein is trotting along with them too.
Yeah, well, yeah, because they hack into Julia's like phone, whatever thing. And then Faye realizes she gets a message from Vicious to be like, yeah, make sure he's there at the old greenery, or at the old greenhouse. And then... You know how he loves those fresh pineapples.
And those bitter cherry tomatoes.
That you tell him not to eat, but he still eats them anyways.
Yeah.
But so it's like they're kind of there to back him up and whatnot, and then it's like even like as almost that action scene of him and Vicious kind of end, it almost just turns into like when Faye and like Jet and Ein all kind of show up. I don't know why, mine's almost like the end of like an '80s action movie. He's just like walking out, just kind of all bloody, like carrying Vicious like over his shoulder and whatnot. And I don't know why. I almost even picture like the end of like Commando with like Arnold Schwarzenegger, when like all the guys, like the troops show up on the ground and Arnold's just kind of stand there and whatnot. He's got his daughter and be like, his daughter's like, "You're not going back to the military, right?" Where it's almost like, "You're not going back to the Red Dragons, right?" No chance. And then just like the total like '80s song starts blasting as the credits come by.
Just drops him on the ground like freeze frame, like.
Some way, you know.
What are just freeze frames? Like, the boys are back in town. No. Credits roll over the still frame.
Because this is one of those things I was kind of wondering the whole time. I was like, oh shit, you know, like, are they going to go with kind of like, maybe is Spike not going to make it here? Is him and Vicious going to kill each other in the process? Is it going to have a long pan up to space? You know, one of those things. But instead, I feel like they kind of want to go like, well shit, what if we want to make a sequel? We don't want to kill Spike off yet. I get it like there. If you want to make the very kind of like artsy movie, I think you would kind of end it with him dying right there. Knowing like, fuck it, we don't make sequels. You know what I mean? But I think you do kind of want to leave that open a little bit, you know.
There's that, and then I also feel like, well, that we also learn as they're checking Julia's files and computers that Thad was actually helping out the Red Dragon. He was under the payroll, and he was one of the reasons why the Red Dragon was able to find them every so often.
Mm-hmm. So then Jet's like, well, fuck that, and he just goes in there, and it's almost like, I feel like even it almost does it sort of like off screen, but I like just the picture. He just goes in there, just punches him across the face, just drags him fucking out. Yeah.
Well, I even like how they have the whole thing like Jet Black, the black dog, like his nickname, and he says like once he bites, he doesn't let go. I'm like, oh yeah, that was his old like motto back when he was a cop.
Yeah, exactly. But
so they do a lot of research, these characters.
Yeah, so then they both get to bring everybody in and collect the bounty, and then it kind of is almost like, oh, now the Bebop's all shiny as it's ever been, looking great, and we can set sail now. Come on, guys, let's go on another wacky adventure.
And Spike has his eye flickering on and off again, like different memories, and he's just kind of wondering, like, am I living in the past or present right now? Because he can't tell. So, and then it ends. Mm-hmm. So, but at the same time, I think that works too. I really like this script. There's like a few things here and there, like, oh, I would have done this differently, I would have done that differently. And if you were going in with like with the idea of a franchise, I maybe would not have pulled some of these references as early as they did. But at the same time, just a one and done movie, I think it really works. And I'm curious to know what they're gonna keep and what they're gonna pull when the live action Netflix show comes on.
Yeah, because no, this one was, I mean, if this was made just identical to how this script was, I would have been like, dude, good enough for me. Like, I'm not that picky, as long as, like, you know, as long as the core ingredients are there. That's really what matters. You know, it's once you start messing up the core ingredients, that's when I feel like you can't tamper too much there. And this one, I feel kind of, it sort of does. I mean, it does its own little things. It kind of reminds me of, like, do you remember when there was like those mangas of Cowboy Bebop? They're kind of like, they were made at like the exact same time as like the anime, but they're like slightly alternative versions.
Here's the thing, I never read them. You think I would have, since I'm such a big Bebop fan, but I flipped through them and it looked a little kind of like anime-y to me. And I know that's weird saying that about Cowboy Bebop, but I mean the more kind of like flamboyant, over-the-top kind of anime-ness of it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It has a little bit of that in there. And I haven't read them. I've read them like almost 15 years ago or something. But I remember those ones kind of, they almost, that's what this script kind of reminded me of, where it's just like, just slightly alternative, you know, just, and I think that one was just because the anime wasn't really technically made. It was just like, there was two ideas and they're like, shit, we can't just make an anime about having a manga. Come on, somebody get on that, draw on that.
It was like only like a 1 or 2 volume series, I think, right? Something
yeah,
like
I think there's 2 books. Yeah.
Which maybe I wouldn't mind checking that out down the line. I just remember seeing some guy who looked like very regal. He was in a long overcoat, kind of like military, kind of like almost royalty kind of thing, with glasses and pointing, looking all like, I travel the stars, like that kind of like look to him. And then like Spike and like Jet are kind of like, oh god, this guy. Which, I mean, I guess I could imagine something like that in the show, but I guess it just looked a little too over the top. Like, I'll get around to it, and I never really did. You know?
Like if Ed did all the animation or did all the drawings.
Kind of, you know, but. But in crayon, yeah. No.
But no, I think this script's pretty sweet.
This script right here is still really fun, a really fun read.
Yeah,
it's like probably my second favorite script we've read on this whole unproduced script series.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where you look at it and you go like, I mean, it might have been a cost issue to why they didn't make it, but it's definitely one of those ones. It's like, oh, this is a solid, like, it's kind of a bummer it wasn't actually, you know, put together. You know what I mean? Like. They did have something good going on here, and that's just sometimes kind of how it goes, you know. Sometimes I feel like it probably is, like, maybe the cost was too much. Still, 2009 is one of that weird time period where I don't know if they want to make anime stuff, but yeah, if you feel like giving it a read, go out and check it out. Find that script by Peter Craig, 2009. It's a fun thing. Beyond that, go to oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comic books like Pizza Boys, old animations, and all that fun stuff. Till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunnigan.
We'll see you some other time.
Later, folks.